President Cyril Ramaphosa has signed the Independent Police Investigative Directorate Amendment Bill into law. Among others, the purpose of the act is to make sure that IPID is independent, impartial, and exercises its powers and functions without fear, favour, or prejudice. For some reaction to this development, I'm now joined by Lesiba Thobakgale. He is the South African Policing Union's spokesperson. Lesiba, a very good afternoon to you. Thanks very much for your time. You weren't happy while this piece of legislation was still going through the parliamentary process. Are you happy with the outcome?
Thank you so much, Bravuyo, and greetings to your viewers. From our side, we had an opportunity greatly to go and appear before the Portfolio Committee in Parliament in relation to the bill before it was signed into an act. As we see it, it has been signed today by the President, and we gave quite meaningful inputs. And we are safe to say that when we looked at the act, how it came out, we could see that most of our inputs that we have given, the areas of concern that we had when we inputted before the Portfolio Committee, they were clearly covered. An example, it comes up to Section 4, which clearly speaks about the independence there when it comes, if you could remember previously on what happened between the case of McBride at that time. And we have seen that the amendment in terms of how we have placed an amendment and the inclusion of the independence thereof of IPID. So we have seen that finding expression clearly into the Act, and also coming to look into Section 6 of the Act thereof, which on its own, it really refers to processes that must follow in case there should be appointments that are made when it comes to IPID, to say that it is not only dependent on the minister themselves or on the minister himself or herself, but it must go through other parliamentary processes. And we can see that clearly that input that we have also given as an organization, it is clearly finding expression. It also goes further, it touches on the issue under Section 8 of the Act, which speaks about the vetting of employees when they are coming into the environment itself. To us, we had a concern there to say that one, because previously the previous status was that one would just apply for an issue of security clearance. And at a later stage, that clearance can come whilst they are within the employ, and that on its own, it really brought some problems, because how would you really deal with those issues? Whereas at a later stage, when you pick up the issue of the security clearance, is telling you about other issues that maybe are not even quite pleasant about that very same applicant who was then employed. So we've seen that in terms of the amendment, indeed, it confirms that there should be quite actions that are clearly taken when it comes to the issue of security clearance, that it is a must to have. But we are just concerned slightly when it comes to the issues of the time frames, to say there were not clearly time frames that were then attached thereof to say when must this issue be finalized. Because, if it is left to be open, it gives you some time whereby what if the finalization of the process, it takes you up to 3 years to really get to finalize the issue of that security clearance. So we are just quite comfortable with it, but we will take it as a work in progress, because the issue of clearance, the security clearance, it is quite important. And also coming further to other sections that speaks to discipline when it goes to IPID playing a critical role. It is not IPID that must then determine to management to say they must then institute steps, when they should then institute steps against members. So remember, the disciplinary regulations, they say that discipline, it is a line management function. So with the previous part, where you will find that commanders would say they are waiting to get a report from IPID, then they can then take steps. So we've seen that has since also been amended, because remember, discipline has to be prompt. It really has to be finalized as soon as possible, so that the member can know their status within their employ at that time. So like we said from the beginning, that we can see that most of the inputs that we have given as an organization, when we even went further to go and really argue, to really motivate at the portfolio committee in Parliament, we've seen that they have been, most of them have been captured.
So just to go back to some of the issues you've read, beginning with the first one, which you say has found expression in the Act. The Constitutional Court found that the IPID Act was, some of its provisions were constitutional insofar as they allowed the minister to suspend, discipline, and remove the executive director. The court also found that suspension, disciplinary, and removal processes should be subject to parliamentary oversight and not be decisions of the executive. In other words, the Minister of Police in this instance. Now, in your view, the Act adequately covers that, even though the committee, by its own admission, says, look, we could have gone further. However, because of the deadline, this has been in the making for 2 years, we felt let's let it slide for now, get the president to sign what is in front of him, and then we can always look at it afterwards. Isn't that a problem for you?
Yeah, no, to us, it is about the impartiality there, to say what are the powers that the minister has, more especially when it comes to the hiring and firing of the executive, using those types of words in simple terms. But as long as for us, it goes to be subjected to other processes, because at the end of the day, there is quite a need to have other role players to be involved. Because if it is subjected to a specific committee, that committee would clearly do justice, because they would be having an investigation that clearly outlines what are the outcomes, what are the facts that are contained in case of misconduct and so on. And at the end of the day, the minister is not the only one who can just stand by himself to say that this is what I will just do, this is what I will just choose to do. Like we referred even at the beginning, referring to the McBride's case, to say it really set us back, because at the end of the day, when it went to court, it could not pass, that action could not pass the constitutional muster. That is why ultimately we have seen clearly that there were issues around him, that there were things that were not done appropriately. So we believe that if it goes through other processes, there's other role players whom it ultimately lands in Parliament for them to really deal with certain issues there. That means then the minister is not just having superpowers around it. Then that impartiality is quite important, because remember, IPID is there to investigate the conduct of the police. So if indeed there's other role players outside the police ministry whom can be able to contribute and really do some work in relation to the very same, it is not just a sole responsibility. We believe that it is a step in the right direction. And when you are dealing with the issues of the law, some of the things you don't just get them right from the beginning, but it becomes a work in progress, where indeed you can be able to circumvent certain actions. When we look at the history that we had, more especially using the McBride's case as one of those precedents that were set, to say, okay, how do we move away from that? How do we make sure that IPID itself is able to operate independently? And moreover, I think I had left another important one, which deals with the conditions of service, or the issues of remuneration. There, on that part, for it to be subjected to other processes, ours is to say, because the Act itself now, it is pronouncing that the minister would go then and really consult with the Minister of Finance. We believe that we don't have a problem with that part, but there is a need to have collective bargaining, because every worker has a right to be subjected to collective bargaining, because we are dealing with the conditions of service here of the members. So to us, it is about that part that we are saying that it is quite important, because it was just equated to remuneration, that of a detective. But if it is subjected clearly to collective bargaining, we believe that the rights of the members who are working under IPID will clearly be protected, because they are also workers also have to enjoy the good conditions of service whilst they are in the uniform.
Of course, as a union, I mean, you would argue that latter part very forcefully. But let me take you to the first part of that answer, the need, you said, for things to be done appropriately, for the superpowers of a minister to be curtailed, and for there to be a semblance, at least, of impartiality. That is not being said. You're not saying that, as, of course, have the other people have also done. You're not saying this because you happen not to like ministers, but because we have seen how heads of these institutions have been vulnerable to political interference and manipulation.
I think, Bravo, it is quite important for us to say, yes, that is true. That independence is quite important, and also the impartiality, it is quite important. But also, when we were in Parliament, we also raised this critical issue, because during the discussions with some of the members of the Portfolio Committee, they wanted it to go IPID to fall and to be regarded as a Chapter 9 institution, which from our side, we clearly opposed that part. And we are quite comfortable when we see that that expression that was made in Parliament, it did not find itself coming to the Act itself, because then for it to be a Chapter 9 institution, then it would really have other, it will be viewed otherwise, because it really falls clearly under policy. We just need to deal with the issue of impartiality. We need to deal with the issue of them being able to do their work without any undue influence, as we know that they are policing the police. And remember, they are also finding an expression in the Police Act as well.
Lesiba Thobakgale, let's leave it there for now. Thanks very much for your time. Really appreciate it.